You didn't stay because you loved them. You stayed because leaving made you feel guilty, because walking away meant you were selfish, cold, ungrateful, cruel. So you stayed. You kept giving, kept shrinking, kept carrying the weight they dropped on you, not because you wanted to, but because you couldn't handle. The voice in your head whispering, if you leave, you're the bad guy. That's not love. That's emotional captivity, disguised as loyalty, packaged as morality, held together by guilt. In this video, we expose how guilt is weaponized by families, partners, manipulators, to keep you emotionally bound. And more importantly, how to break free from it without breaking yourself. 1. The psychology of guilt as a weapon. Guilt is one of the most effective psychological weapons ever created, not because it's loud, but because it's quiet, subtle, internal. You don't hear guilt, you feel it, and because you feel it, you obey it. Unlike anger or fear, guilt doesn't force you. It convinces you. It whispers, you owe them. You shouldn't walk away. If you say no, you're not a good person. And you believe it. Because guilt disguises itself as morality. The truth is this. Most guilt is not real. It's installed. It's programmed into you through repetition, shame, and emotional association. Parents say, after all I've done, this is how you treat me. Partners say, if you loved me, you'd do this for me. Bosses say, the team depends on you, don't let them down. And you internalize it, not as manipulation, but as duty. You feel responsible for their emotions, their pain, their expectations, so you overgive, overextend, overstay. And the worst part, you do it willingly. Because guilt doesn't control you with fear. It controls you with identity. It makes you believe that being a good person means sacrificing yourself. That love means tolerating mistreatment. That loyalty means never walking away. That's how guilt wins. It makes your self-image the prison guard. This is not about blaming others. This is about understanding the system. Because once you see guilt, not as a moral compass, but as a behavioral leash, you can begin to unclip it. You can start to separate what's yours to carry from what was never yours to begin with. And that's when control starts shifting. From them, back to you. 2 to 4 forms of guilt manipulation. Guilt manipulation isn't always obvious. It rarely screams. It whispers. It hints. It creates pressure without a single direct demand. Here are the 4 most common forms of guilt-based control. You've felt them, you've lived them, and now you'll see them clearly. 1. Moral framing. After everything I've done for you, this is how you treat me. This tactic uses your values against you. It reframes your boundaries as betrayal, your self-protection as selfishness, your independence as disrespect. Suddenly, saying no makes you feel ungrateful. Choosing yourself makes you feel cruel. It's not about facts, it's about moral pressure. They don't ask, they imply. You're not just disagreeing with them, you're disappointing who you should be. And that's how they trap you in guilt. 2. Emotional debt. I was there for you when no one else was. I gave you everything. You owe me this. This is guilt packaged as emotional accounting. They remind you of past favors, not to connect, but to collect. You didn't ask for what they gave. They offered it. But now they use it as leverage. The message is clear. You're in debt, and the payment is your compliance. This tactic is especially powerful in families, friendships, and long-term relationships, where the emotional ledger runs deep. Third, victim inversion. You hurt me by doing what's best for you. This tactic flips roles. They cause chaos, neglect, or pressure. And when you finally push back, they crumble. Suddenly, they're the victim. They cry, withdraw, blame their pain on your boundaries. And you? You feel cruel for standing up for yourself. This is weaponized vulnerability. They don't fight you, they fold, so you'll fix it. And it works. Because you're the type who cares. 4. Silent pressure. No words, just silence, distance, cold energy. You say no, and they don't argue. They just change, withdraw, act hurt, without explanation. Now, you feel the tension, the invisible weight. You start wondering, did I do something wrong? Should I apologize? This tactic is effective because it lets your own mind do the manipulation for them. They don't need to guilt trip you directly. They just pull away and let your emotional reflexes do the rest. All 4 of these tactics share one goal: to keep you emotionally bound, not by force, but by your own conscience. The leash isn't on your body, it's on your identity. But once you name the tactic, you weaken its power. Because guilt only controls you when it hides behind love, loyalty, or morality. 3. Why guilt is so hard to escape. You can spot the manipulation. You can name the tactic. You can even know it's unfair and still feel guilty. Why? Because guilt doesn't live in your logic. It lives in your identity, in how you define who you are, and that's why it's so powerful. Guilt hooks into your self-image. You see yourself as kind, loyal, empathetic, someone who doesn't abandon others, someone who doesn't cause pain. So when someone suggests that you've hurt them, even if they manipulated the entire situation, your identity reacts, not your brain, your ego. That's not who I am. I'm not selfish. I'm not cold. I'm not ungrateful. So you overcorrect. You go back, you give in, you sacrifice, not because it's right, but because it protects your image of being good. You were trained to associate boundaries with betrayal. From childhood, you were programmed. Speaking up equals disrespect. Saying no equals rejection. Prioritizing yourself equals being selfish. You were rewarded when you complied, punished when you asserted. And now, as an adult, you still carry that wiring. When you try to set a boundary, your nervous system flinches, not because you're wrong, but because your subconscious says, danger. If you protect yourself, you'll lose love. This is emotional conditioning, and it's not accidental. It was installed by people who benefited from your silence. Guilt feeds on emotional responsibility. Another reason guilt sticks: you've been taught that you are responsible for how others feel. If they're sad, it's your fault. If they're hurt, you caused it. If they fall apart, it's because you weren't there. And because you care, you accept that responsibility. But here's the truth. You are responsible for your intent, not their interpretation. You can make a healthy choice. and still trigger someone else's insecurity. That's not your guilt to carry. The manipulator knows you're wired this way. They don't need to shout. They don't need to control you with aggression. They just need to tap into your conscience. They know what phrases trigger you. They know what looks make you question yourself. They know exactly how long to go quiet before you start chasing their approval again. This is psychological warfare, using your own values as the weapon against you. And unless you reprogram the root belief, you'll keep returning to the same trap. The real battle isn't about them. It's about you. Your guilt isn't about what you did. It's about who you think you must be to earn love, respect, and belonging. And the more you identify with that good person role, the easier it is to control you. But here's the shift. True goodness isn't blind sacrifice. It's clarity, discernment, integrity. Sometimes being the good person means walking away, saying no, letting someone be disappointed, because their happiness isn't worth your mental collapse. You don't need to explain it. You just need to stop confusing guilt with guidance, because guilt is not your moral compass. It's the leash they installed to make you stay. 4. How to disarm the guilt trap. You don't escape guilt by fighting it. You escape by disarming it, by removing the hooks it uses to stay embedded in your mind. Here's how you take the leash off, without losing your soul in the process. 1. Separate guilt from responsibility. Just because someone feels hurt doesn't mean you caused their pain, and even if you did, it doesn't mean you're obligated to fix it. Guilt tells you, if they're in pain, you must do something. But responsibility is about your choices, not their emotions. You can care without caving. You can feel compassion without collapsing. Say this to yourself: I'm allowed to choose myself, even if it disappoints someone else. 2. Interrupt the emotional loop. Guilt feeds on your reaction. They sigh. You ask what's wrong. They go silent. You start apologizing. Break the loop. The next time guilt rises, pause. Don't respond immediately. Let the discomfort sit. This is how you retrain your nervous system to realize their tension isn't my cue to surrender. Silence isn't always yours to fill. Fixing isn't always your role to play. 3. Neutralize their framing. Guilt works because they define the narrative. You abandoned them. You're ungrateful. You changed. Refuse the frame. Instead of defending yourself, restate the facts. I'm setting a boundary, not punishing you. I'm making a decision, not betraying you. I've grown, and that's not a crime. Language is power, and reframing is how you take it back. 4. Reprogram the identity narrative. At the root of guilt is this belief: good people don't cause pain. But here's the truth. Good people cause pain when they grow. Good people walk away from what's killing them. Good people choose truth over compliance. Redefine what it means to be good. Not obedient but honest. Not sacrificial but discerning. Not pleasing but sovereign. This is where real freedom starts. When your identity no longer bends to every emotion others throw at you. You don't need to feel guilty. For surviving, this isn't about becoming cold. It's about becoming clear. You don't fight guilt with emotion. You disarm it with logic, with boundaries, with silence. Because once guilt loses its grip, manipulation dies with it. 5. When walking away is the most moral act. They told you walking away makes you selfish, cold, heartless. But here's the truth. Sometimes walking away is the most moral thing you can do. Not because you don't care, but because you finally do. For yourself. Staying in toxic systems just to avoid guilt doesn't make you noble. It makes you a prisoner, and the longer you stay, the more you enable the pattern. You become complicit in your own destruction. That's not loyalty, that's self-abandonment. And calling it love doesn't change what it is. Some people only grow when they're forced to face your absence, and some never will. That's not your job to manage. That's not your burden to carry. Your responsibility is not to preserve their comfort. It's to protect your clarity. And sometimes that clarity demands distance, not out of hate, but out of truth. Let go of the illusion that being a good person means tolerating harm. Let go of the fear that their sadness makes you the villain. You are not evil for choosing peace. You are not cruel for protecting your mental health. Sometimes leaving isn't running away, it's returning to yourself. 6. Final CTA. Guilt is not truth. It's pressure. It's control, disguised as care. It's how people keep you close without force. How they make you comply without commands. How they make you stay long after the connection has died, but now you see it. And once you see it, you choose differently. You stop apologizing for self-preservation. You stop confusing pain with responsibility. You stop mistaking endurance for love. From this point forward, you live by a different code. I don't owe anyone my destruction. To prove I'm a good person. You can walk away, say no, detach, and not feel guilty. Because the moment you do, you reclaim your freedom. In the next video, you'll learn how rejection itself can be a psychological weapon. When used with clarity and distance, it elevates your value, breaks emotional dependency, and sends a message louder than any confrontation. It's called cold rejection, the tactic that makes you irresistible. And once you master it, you'll never chase validation again.